want to do something special. Do you? We're going to do something special, gentlemen, and we will never forget this season. Ever.
Let's do this! Who's gonna be the f***ing savage today? What do you think?
They were the league's running joke until they started running over everything in their path. For as long as most people can remember, the Detroit Lions had been worse than bad. They were tragic, going 3 decades without a playoff win. They had a generational talent in Calvin Johnson, who retired early because of the toxic culture within the organization. Matthew Stafford's prime years were wasted in a seemingly endless string of disappointments. The defense couldn't stop anyone, and the head coaches came and went like bad weather. But then something changed, and for the last 3 years, we haven't been watching the old Detroit Lions. We've been watching the transformation of a franchise. This is the story of how the Lions went from heartbreakingly hopeless to pure hell for opponents to line up against.
Oh, here we go. Here we go.
Let's rewind to 2008 for a second. The season where Detroit didn't just lose football games, they lost every single football game.
Lions season will come to an end in very disappointing fashion in Dallas.
16 losses, a perfect record in reverse. They were the first team in NFL history to go 0-16, and if you were watching back then, you'll remember that it didn't even feel shocking. It felt expected. Because what happened in Detroit wasn't a fluke collapse. It was the result of decades of misfires, bad drafts, worse defenses, and a culture that seemed averse to winning. Even when things were supposed to turn around, they still didn't. Matthew Stafford arrived in 2009 and spent the next decade putting up numbers that should have built a dynasty.
Inside the 30, to the house! Touchdown Detroit Lions!
Over 12 seasons, he threw for over 45,000 yards and 282 touchdowns. And what did Detroit give him in return? Only 3 playoff games and 3 playoff losses. Not a single postseason win. Calvin Johnson was arguably the most unstoppable receiver in the modern era, yet his career was wasted in Detroit. In 2012, Megatron broke the all-time record for receiving yards in a single season with 1,964. 2 years later, he retired at age 30. Not because his body quit, but because the franchise did. And then came the Matt Patricia era, a coaching regime that was so toxic and backwards that players went from celebrating wins to counting down the days until they could leave. Patricia tried to install the Patriot way, but he did so without Tom Brady, without the trust of his players, and without a defense that could stop a screen pass. From 2018 to 2020, the Lions finished bottom 5 in nearly every major defensive category. In 2020, they were dead last in points allowed, and by the end, the locker room was leaking, the players had checked out, and Detroit had gone from lost to lifeless. So no, this wasn't a rebuild. It was a football funeral that ran for 20 years. Then, Dan Campbell walked into the building. When Campbell was introduced as the head coach of the Detroit Lions in 2021, he walked into the building with a laundry list of things to fix and a speech that made the entire NFL raise its eyebrows. He talked about toughness and resilience. He talked about getting knocked down and getting back up over and over again until the other guy didn't.
We're going to kick you in the teeth, and when we do, we're going to take another hunk out of you.
Around the league, most people laughed. After all, this wasn't the next Sean McVay. Campbell wasn't holding a laminated play sheet or quoting analytics. He looked more like a linebacker who wandered into the press room by accident and decided to sound off. And yet somehow, maybe because of how raw and unpolished it was, something about it felt real. Dan Campbell didn't bring in a flashy system or a superstar free agent. He brought in football people.
Let's be sharp! Be sharp! Move your feet!
His coordinators weren't rising gurus, they were former players. Aaron Glenn, Deuce Staley, Mark Brunell, they'd all been there. They'd bled for it, and that mattered because for once, Detroit wasn't trying to outsmart the league. They were trying to out-tough it. From day one, there was accountability. No special treatment, no coddling, no passive-aggressive pressers throwing players under the bus. They built a team room where you could speak honestly and be challenged honestly right back. and the players responded. In 2021, they went an unimpressive 3-13-1, but it was clear from the launch that something had changed within the organization. Despite the record, no one on that team quit. No one mailed it in. They lost close and lost ugly, but they never once rolled over, and in Detroit, that alone was progress. By 2023, the transformation was undeniable. The Lions had climbed to number 3 in the league in NFLPA locker room rankings, meaning only 2 teams in the league had a roster more invested in the system. It wasn't because of the amenities or even the weather. It was because for the first time in decades, players wanted to be there.
Hey, turn me up!
They trusted the coaching, trusted each other, and above all, they trusted Dan Campbell. Because Dan didn't walk in and demand respect or belief in how he would run things. He earned it. And in a league that usually hands power to system guys and stat sheet visionaries, Detroit gave theirs to a motivator, and that decision changed everything. And if you want to keep up on all of the latest NFL action, hit like and subscribe after the video.
Let's work, come on.
What came next wasn't an overnight miracle. Detroit didn't flip a switch and start winning games, they went to work. Because building a new identity would take more than a culture change. It was about drafting guys who fit that culture like they'd been there all along. And that's exactly what Brad Holmes did. In 2021, he drafted Penei Sewell, a 20-year-old tackle from Oregon, and threw him into the fire. By 2024, Sewell had become a cornerstone, literally.
Y'all need some inspiration? I'm gonna show y'all. Y'all need the standard? I'm gonna show y'all.
That year, he graded as the #1 tackle in football by PFF with a score of 91.4 by bullying rushers into irrelevance. In 2022, they went local with the #2 pick, Aidan Hutchinson, a hometown kid with a high motor and no-nonsense approach to the game, and from day one, Hutchinson looked like he belonged. By 2024, he had racked up 28.5 career sacks, anchoring a defense that was finally punching back. But the flashiest moves weren't even the ones that made the biggest difference. That honor belongs to a 4th-round pick out of USC named Amon-Ra St. Brown, and calling him a steal doesn't even feel strong enough.
He's ridiculous. Just being able to catch it, make guys miss, finish in the end zone.
In 2023 alone, Amon-Ra St. Brown tallied 119 receptions, over 1,500 yards, and was a top 5 fantasy wideout and an emotional tone setter for the entire offense. Then came the 2023 draft class, and that's when things exploded. In the same weekend, the Lions added Jahmyr Gibbs and Sam Laporta, who both played like stars from the jump. Gibbs, a slasher in the open field with the burst to break any play wide open, brought electricity, finishing his rookie campaign with 1,261 scrimmage yards and 11 touchdowns.
The 13, Gibbs left, Jahmyr Gibbs accelerates into the end zone!
At tight end, Laporta led all rookie tight ends while outplaying veterans and finished the season with 83 catches, nearly 1,000 yards, and 10 touchdowns. Those are all pro numbers, not rookie stats. But even the best drafted talent needs a quarterback. Jared Goff came in as a throw-in from the Stafford trade, a bridge quarterback, maybe even a salary dump. But by 2024, he had turned into something else entirely. He was the calm in Detroit's storm. In 2024, Goff threw for 4,629 yards and 37 touchdowns with a ridiculously high 72.4% completion rate. He was accurate, efficient, and respected by his teammates as a guy who had been there before. But what made Jared's resurgence special wasn't the deep bombs or the gaudy stats, it was how steady he became. He wasn't trying to be Mahomes or Allen, he was just winning games. And for a franchise that had chased chaos for so long, that kind of calm at quarterback was more than refreshing, it was transformative. So no, Detroit didn't build this core through splashy trades or free agent hype cycles. They drafted it, developed it, and indoctrinated it into a culture of tenacity and toughness. That's how they become something genuinely dangerous to go up against.
I think the way that culture of that team is, they're a team that everyone is taking notice right now, man. The Lions are a tough team to beat.
When the 2024 season kicked off, it didn't feel like a wait-and-see year. It felt like a warning that became a self-fulfilling prophecy as the wins piled up, 15 of them in one season. Not a lot of teams do that in this era. The Detroit Lions, the team that hadn't won a division title since the NFC Central days in 1993, finished the regular season 15-2 and locked up the NFC North with room to spare.
Whenever you do something like what we just did, it's special. But I can tell you this, when you're part of the organization, and it's been 30 years, man.
But it wasn't just the record that shocked people, it was how they got there. The Lions ended the regular season number 1 in scoring average, putting up a ridiculous 33.2 points per game. They also finished number 2 in total yardage and topped the NFL in yards after catch, a stat that says as much about play design as it does about effort. And that's what made Detroit terrifying. This wasn't a finesse team. This was a well-oiled machine that hit you in the mouth, got up, and asked if you wanted to try again. In the red zone, they were clinical, converting touchdowns at a top 3 rate league-wide. On the other side of the ball, the defense wasn't perfect, but they got off the field when it mattered, and the pass rush came alive, ranking 7th in pressure rate. The Lions had stars, balance, and for the first time in, well, maybe forever, they also had a home field advantage. Because Ford Field isn't just loud in the Dan Campbell era, it's downright hostile. Opponents come in full of vim and vigor and leave dizzy. You can't hear the snap count, you can't even hear yourself think, and you sure as hell aren't walking out of there with an easy win. The Lions didn't sneak into the playoffs, they roared in, and suddenly a franchise that had been stuck in neutral for decades was now driving the entire NFC playoff picture. There's a moment that happens, and it's hard to describe, when a losing team stops being funny and starts being feared, and for Detroit, that moment came in 2024. But this story isn't solely about stats or scores or sacks even. It's about a city that had been kicked around for decades by the economy, by the media, by its own damn football team. Because for years, Lions fans weren't showing up for glory, they showed up out of loyalty. They filled Ford Field through 3-win seasons, bought jerseys of players who left too soon, and passed down the heartbreak like a family heirloom. But they kept believing even when they shouldn't have. So when the Lions finally altered the narrative, when they finally started winning, really winning, it was a release for an entire city. It was sons and daughters watching their parents cry after a playoff win. It was people who'd sworn off football, feeling something they hadn't in years: pride. It was Detroit, as a city, finally seeing itself reflected in its team. National networks started calling as primetime slots opened up, because the Lions were no longer the butt of the joke, but they were the team setting the bar. Coaches still circled them on the schedule, but not as an easy win or a look-ahead game, but as a measuring stick. And through it all, Dan Campbell stood in front of the mic, sleeves rolled up, voice cracking, as he said what everyone in the city was feeling: the good and the bad.
It just hurts to lose, man, and it stings, and it hurts.
For all that growth, for all the fire and fury the Lions brought into January, the 2024 season still ended in heartbreak. After a dominant regular season, Detroit fell short in the divisional round, knocked out at home by the Washington Commanders in a game that left fans stunned and speechless. The city had waited 3 decades for a run like this, and to see it end just 2 steps from the Super Bowl hurt like hell. But there was something different about it now. That pain didn't signify another ending, not in the new Detroit. That pain has been put in the tank as fuel for 2025, because for the first time in generations, Lions fans didn't walk away from a playoff loss with despair. They walked away with expectations. They know what this team is now, and they know exactly where it's going.
Hey, great job up front. Great job. Great job.
Detroit might have been knocked out, but nobody's counting them out anymore. And from Dan Campbell, there were no excuses. No talk about what a great season it had been despite the loss. Just an honest evaluation and a genuine display of the exact emotions every fan in the city was feeling. That the team had fallen short and that it hurt, but also that the loss wasn't going to define them. Under Dan Campbell, the new Lions weren't supposed to matter, and they certainly weren't supposed to last more than a season or 2. For decades, the Lions were a team you scheduled your bye week around as a guaranteed win or a Thanksgiving sideshow, but not anymore. Because this team did more than start winning football games, they changed the way they're regarded within the league. They showed what happens when you combine homegrown talent with a head coach who leads from the heart, when you build toughness into your DNA instead of outsourcing it in free agency, and when a city known for getting knocked down finally stands up together. The 2024 season didn't finish with confetti or a trophy, but it ended with something this franchise hasn't had in a long, long time: belief. So now, we'll ask you, is this just the beginning or Detroit's best shot at the crown? Drop your take in the comment section below. We're listening, and this has been Snap Count. Subscribe for more underdog stories, redemption arcs, and NFL legacy breakdowns. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.